Great to be here, Karen, with you and all the leadership of SA 2020.
So I actually was not around I was not in San Antonio, although I am from San Antonio. I didn't learn about the community vision until I returned back home around 2015. And even still for me, the community vision is such a great source of pride. I also know that because the shared community vision says that we take collective responsibility for each other's well-being in San Antonio, that it's hugely powerful and important at this moment. We are living through a pandemic. Given your leadership of San Antonio, what makes you most proud of our city right now?
I'm proud to be in a city where it's still teamwork that gets us through. The pandemic has been a challenge for every community in this country. San Antonio has fared better than most. And it has simply been because the community pulling together to help neighbors helping neighbors. I'm inspired by that, and that's part of our DNA from when this city was born to now. You see it in the work that our medical professionals and frontline health workers are doing, our first responders, but you also see it in the work of average neighbors. It's just neighbors doing what they know to do, which is to help each other out.
We have March 13th in our brain at Team SA 2020. We know that was the decision and the point at which we knew we had to quarantine and be working from home. And very quickly, what we saw in March in San Antonio was institutions across sectors were swiftly making policy changes, process changes, program changes in order to meet the needs of San Antonians, right? We saw things that we know will ultimately drive progress towards San Antonio's community vision. What great lesson then do you expect to emerge for San Antonio out of this crisis that will help us drive progress for another 10 years?
Well, this pandemic has many images and stories that I think are going to be part of our common vernacular, not just here in San Antonio, but across the country. And one of those images is the food bank line weeks after the pandemic began. That is the image I think a lot of people associate with this pandemic, because it has brought into clarity so many of the underlying issues, not just in San Antonio, but across this country, and how close to the brink so many families were economically even before all this began. And for us, the mission is breaking cycles of generational poverty that had put so many families at that point, long before we even knew what coronavirus was. And so that's why I think you've seen the community come together and to go headlong on creating access to education, access to economic mobility, which comes in many forms, including physical mobility, transportation. And that's going to be the thrust of our work. It really, we had that mindset and we were talking about it all indirectly, but this pandemic has focused the effort and allowed us as a community to really hone in on the issue of generational poverty and economic mobility.
Yeah, we've certainly been echoing the same sentiment at SA 2020, that we know that the pandemic has compounded the complex community challenges that we faced in San Antonio. I find great also power in knowing that historical inequities were created by human beings, and therefore we as human beings have the power to be advancing equity as well as reaching San Antonio's community vision. We like to say we as individuals then make up the larger systems that we seek to change, right? In addition to being a mayor, you are a neighbor and a voter and a father. As mayor of San Antonio, we know that there's great responsibility, power, and influence in that position. What do you see as your role in moving us closer to our shared vision?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I think back to September 25th, 2010, and I was just another concerned citizen, community member, coming to the SA 2020 meetings to add my voice to what this city should strive to be as a neighbor, as a father, as a husband. And so what is my role now? It's not dissimilar to what it was back then, adding my voice, but my main role in terms of achieving that vision that we collectively assembled is to use my voice to empower those who I represent, which happens to be this entire community. And I think that that's why we're here. SA2020 is a collective vision assembled by community, thousands of folks who came together in 2010 and 2011 to tell us where we wanted to go. And it's my responsibility to carry that voice and move us closer.
So from being someone who was participating in the original visioning process, deepening and growing your leadership as a city council member and now a mayor, tell us in this time, how has your connection to San Antonio deepened or changed since 2010?
It's very interesting and it's visceral. I was inspired to deepen my involvement in the community after I became a father, and then it was further inspired by getting involved in SA 2020, and ultimately led me to run for city council, and ultimately here I am. The work that we're doing to help people and to improve the lives and future of our community here in San Antonio, particularly those who are on the margins. When you're serving in such a capacity, you feel the pain of the members of the community that you serve, and you feel the frustration that they feel. You feel the disappointment when things don't go right, and you feel the victories when things do. To me, it's almost as if the city has become part of me, part of my body, part of my heart, and it makes it challenging, but also it gives you great strength and clarity in the work that you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it makes me think of how much we celebrate the big, bold efforts of the last decade. The greatest progress that we see in San Antonio is when we have policies, budget decisions, service delivery decisions that are informed by the folks who will be most impacted by them. And we know then, right, that we are all, as a result, everyone in San Antonio is better for it. So when we talk about big, bold efforts in San Antonio, what is the one that comes up for you that you are most inspired by?
It's hard to name one, but I think the one that is at the foundation of everything that we're doing in the community is establishing equity as the founding principle for policymaking and resource allocation. We did that in 2017. We continue to build on it and learn how to do it better. It's obviously informed by the data of SA 2020, and it's produced these other efforts like the housing policy framework, first of its kind in the history of San Antonio, the climate action adaptation plan, which is built on equity and climate justice, and then of course Alamo Promise, which is the moonshot to post-secondary educational access.
So we are, all of this year, SA 2020 has been reaffirming and strengthening San Antonio's community vision for another decade. What is your call to action as mayor of San Antonio for folks who are tuning in today?
Vote in November like your future depends on it, because it does. I think, here we are again in the middle of a pandemic. We've had a moment of reckoning across the country. We know our challenges. We've seen them laid in naked truth. So vote like your future depends on it. And the theme for me in this year's important November ballot is to invest in the people of our community, not just by virtue of putting folks who recognize that into office, but also really let's invest our resources into the people of this city to ensure that we all have a brighter future moving forward.
Ron, thank you for your leadership, especially during this COVID-19 crisis. This showing and modeling shared responsibility for our collective well-being. I guess we could add wash your hands and wear a mask. That wouldn't hurt too on your way.
I'm alone in this room here, but I have my mask.
There we go. Well done.